Marcus Williams stepped off the bus, his sneakers crunching against the gravel of Lincoln High School's parking lot. The air smelled faintly of freshly cut grass and chalk dust from the nearby baseball field. He adjusted the strap of his backpack, feeling its weight dig into his shoulder, not just from books, but also from the invisible burden of being the new kid yet again. This wasn't his first time starting over. His mom had a habit of landing jobs in places far away from their old life. But this town felt different. Smaller, quieter, and somehow colder. As Marcus walked toward the entrance, he noticed the stares almost immediately. Some were curious glances, others openly judgmental. A group of boys near the bike racks snickered as he passed, one of them muttering something about his jeans, dark denim, slightly worn at the knees, and another pointing at his sneakers, which were scuffed but clean. Marcus pretended not to hear them. He'd learned early on that reacting only made things worse. Still, the whispers pricked at him like tiny needles. Inside the building, the hallways buzzed with activity. Lockers slammed shut, students laughed loudly, and teachers shouted reminders about assignments. It all felt chaotic, overwhelming even. Marcus clutched the schedule in his hand tightly, scanning for room 14B. As he turned a corner, he collided with someone. A tall boy with broad shoulders and an easy smirk. The impact sent Marcus stumbling backward, his papers scattering across the floor. "Watch it," the boy said, his tone dripping with mockery. His friends gathered around, chuckling like hyenas circling prey. One of them leaned down to pick up Marcus's notebook, flipping through it casually before tossing it back. "What's this? You draw stick figures or something?" Marcus clenched his fists but forced himself to stay calm. He met the leader's gaze steadily, recognizing the type instantly. Derek, the kind of guy who thrived on making others feel small. Derek's two sidekicks, Tyler and Jake, flanked him like loyal henchmen, their smirks matching his perfectly. They weren't just bullies. They were performers, feeding off the attention of bystanders who watched silently, too afraid to intervene. "Sorry," Marcus said simply, bending down to gather his things. His voice was quiet but steady, betraying none of the frustration bubbling beneath the surface. He didn't want trouble, especially not on his first day. But deep inside, a part of him bristled at the injustice of it all. Why did people always assume they could push him around? The bell rang, cutting short whatever witty remark Derek had been about to throw next. With a final sneer, the trio sauntered off, leaving Marcus standing alone in the crowded hallway. For a moment, he considered turning back, hopping on the next bus out of town. But then he remembered his mom's words from the night before. "You're stronger than you think, Marcus. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." Taking a deep breath, Marcus straightened up and headed to class. If there was one thing he knew for sure, it was this. High school might be hard, but he'd faced tougher challenges before. And while he hoped to avoid conflict, he couldn't shake the feeling that trouble would find him anyway. What Derek and his crew didn't know, what no one here knew, was that Marcus carried more than just books in his backpack. Hidden beneath the surface was a skill set honed over years of discipline, shaped by countless hours of training in his uncle's gym. Gym class was always a battleground, but for Marcus, it felt more like a minefield. The echoing squeaks of sneakers on polished wood, the shouts of students scrambling for the basketball, and the sharp whistle blasts from Coach Harris created an atmosphere that buzzed with energy and tension. Marcus stood near the edge of the court, his arms crossed loosely over his chest as he watched the other boys jostle for position. He wasn't particularly eager to join in, but sitting out wasn't an option either. Derek, Tyler, and Jake were already dominating the game, their loud voices bouncing off the walls as they passed the ball back and forth. Derek especially seemed to relish the spotlight, barking orders at his teammates and laughing whenever someone missed a shot. But when the teams were divided, Marcus found himself lumped onto Derek's side. At first, Derek didn't seem to notice or care about Marcus's presence. That changed quickly. "Yo, new kid," Derek called out, dribbling the ball lazily while scanning the court. "Get over here. You're playing defense." His tone was sharp, commanding, leaving no room for argument. Marcus hesitated for a split second before stepping forward. He positioned himself between Derek and the opposing team's best player, keeping his stance relaxed but alert. The moment the ball left Derek's hands, chaos erupted. Instead of passing cleanly, Derek shoved Marcus hard from behind, sending him stumbling into the path of another player. The collision drew gasps from nearby students, though none dared to say anything. Derek laughed, slapping his knee as if it were the funniest thing he'd ever seen. "What's wrong, tough guy? Too slow to keep up." Marcus straightened up slowly, brushing imaginary dirt off his shirt. His jaw tightened briefly, but he kept his expression neutral. If Derek wanted a reaction, Marcus wasn't going to give him one. Not yet. Around them, whispers rippled through the crowd, some sympathetic, others mocking. Someone muttered, "Just ignore him," while another snickered, "Bet he won't fight back." Tyler and Jake joined in, circling closer like vultures sensing weakness. "Yeah, man," Tyler chimed in, leaning in too close for comfort. "You scared or something? Don't you know how to throw a punch?" Jake mimicked throwing a jab, earning laughs from the growing audience. Their words hit like pebbles, small but relentless, chipping away at Marcus's patience. But Marcus didn't flinch. Instead, he locked eyes with Derek, his gaze unwavering. There was something unsettling about the way Marcus looked at him. Not angry, not afraid, just calm. It unnerved Derek, though he tried not to show it. "What's your deal, huh?" Derek demanded, stepping closer until they were nearly nose to nose. "You deaf or dumb?" For a brief moment, Marcus considered walking away. He could feel the weight of dozens of eyes on him, waiting to see what he'd do next. But deep down, he knew this wasn't just about him anymore. Every shove, every insult, every cruel laugh, it all added up to something bigger. These guys weren't just picking on him. They were testing his limits, daring him to break. And Marcus had learned long ago that breaking wasn't the same as fighting back. Without saying a word, Marcus turned and walked toward the sidelines, signaling to Coach Harris that he needed a water break. As he moved, he caught glimpses of confused faces among the crowd. Some looked disappointed, expecting a brawl. Others appeared relieved, glad the tension hadn't escalated further. Only Derek seemed genuinely irritated, muttering under his breath as Marcus disappeared into the locker room. Inside, Marcus leaned against the cool metal of a locker, letting out a slow breath. He knew Derek wouldn't let this go. Guys like him thrived on power plays, feeding off fear and submission. But Marcus also knew something Derek didn't. Strength wasn't always about throwing the first punch. Sometimes it was about knowing when to hold back and when to strike. And if Derek pushed him too far, Marcus would be ready. By the end of gym class, word had spread like wildfire through Lincoln High. Marcus Williams wasn't just quiet. He was different. Some students admired his restraint during the basketball incident, whispering that maybe he was smarter than they thought. Others weren't so kind, calling him weak or scared for refusing to fight back. Either way, everyone seemed to have an opinion about him. And Derek, he couldn't stop thinking about it. Derek sat at his usual spot in the cafeteria later that day, surrounded by Tyler, Jake, and a few other guys who hung on his every word. His voice carried across the noisy room as he replayed the events of gym class for anyone who would listen. "I pushed him," Derek bragged, leaning back in his chair with a cocky grin. "Right into another player. You should have seen it. He didn't even try to hit me back." Tyler snickered, shoving a handful of fries into his mouth. "Maybe he's scared of you, man. Or maybe he knows he'd get wrecked if he tried anything." Jake chimed in, nodding enthusiastically. "Yeah, probably thinks he can play the victim card or something. People like him always do." Derek smirked, but deep down, he felt uneasy. Something about Marcus's calm demeanor stuck with him. Most kids cracked under pressure, yelled, cried, or ran away. But Marcus hadn't done any of those things. Instead, he'd stared right at Derek, his dark eyes steady and unreadable. It made Derek wonder, what was Marcus hiding? That night, lying awake in bed, Derek couldn't shake the feeling that he'd underestimated the new kid. What if Marcus wasn't afraid? What if he was biding his time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike back? The idea gnawed at Derek until he decided there was only one way to find out for sure: push harder. The next morning, Derek cornered Tyler and Jake near their lockers. "We're gonna test him," he said, lowering his voice so no one else could hear. "Lunchtime. We'll catch him outside near the dumpsters. It's secluded enough that nobody will interrupt. If he fights back, we'll know he's got guts. If not—" Derek grinned, cracking his knuckles. "Then we'll make sure everyone knows he's nothing but a coward." Tyler and Jake exchanged glances, excitement flickering in their eyes. They loved drama almost as much as they loved being part of Derek's schemes. "What's the plan?" Tyler asked eagerly. "Simple," Derek replied. "We act casual, like we're just messing around. Then I'll throw the first punch. If he doesn't fight back, we keep going until he does, or until he runs. Either way, we win." As they finalized their plan, none of them noticed Marcus watching from a distance, standing near the water fountain. He'd overheard just enough to piece together what was coming. A muscle twitched in his jaw, but otherwise, his expression remained calm. He'd suspected this might happen eventually. Kids like Derek thrived on intimidation. They fed off fear and submission. But Marcus knew better than to let anger cloud his judgment. He'd been trained to handle situations like this, taught to stay composed until the moment demanded action. Still, as Marcus walked to his next class, he couldn't help but feel a surge of frustration. He hadn't come to Lincoln High looking for trouble. All he wanted was to blend in, to survive until graduation without drawing attention to himself. But now, thanks to Derek and his crew, trouble had found him anyway. For the rest of the morning, Marcus weighed his options. He could avoid the confrontation altogether, skip lunch, hide out in a library, or tell a teacher what he'd overheard. But avoidance wouldn't solve the problem. It would only delay it. Sooner or later, Derek would come after him again, more aggressive each time. And while Marcus didn't want to fight, he also refused to live in fear. By the time the lunch bell rang, Marcus had made up his mind. He grabbed his bag and headed toward the cafeteria, knowing full well that Derek and his friends would be waiting outside. As he pushed open the heavy double doors, the cool autumn air greeted him, carrying with it the faint smell of trash from the nearby dumpsters. Sure enough, Derek, Tyler, and Jake were already there, lounging against the wall like predators lying in wait. Marcus paused for a moment, taking a deep breath. He tightened the straps of his backpack and squared his shoulders. Whatever happened next, he was ready. The moment Marcus stepped into the shadowy corner near the dumpsters, Derek pushed off the wall with a grin that could only be described as predatory. Tyler and Jake followed suit, forming a loose semicircle around Marcus, their smirks mirroring Derek's confidence. The air seemed to thicken with tension, the distant hum of students laughing and chatting inside the cafeteria feeling miles away. "Hey, new kid," Derek drawled, his voice dripping with mockery. "Thought you'd skip out on us. Guess we underestimated you." He took a step closer, his posture relaxed but deliberate, like a cat toying with its prey. "But here's the thing. You don't talk much, do you? Makes me wonder, what's going on in that head of yours?" Marcus didn't respond immediately. Instead, he stood perfectly still, his hands hanging loosely at his sides. His eyes scanned the trio briefly, before settling back on Derek. There was no fear in his expression, only calm focus. It unnerved Derek more than anything else. "You think you're tough, huh?" Derek continued, trying to cover his unease with bravado. "Walking around like you own the place, ignoring everyone who talks to you. Well, let's see how tough you really are." With that, he lunged forward, swinging a fist aimed squarely at Marcus's face. It happened so fast that Tyler and Jake barely had time to react. Marcus sidestepped smoothly, dodging the punch with ease. Before Derek could recover, Marcus grabbed his wrist with one hand and twisted it gently but firmly, forcing Derek to stumble forward. The move wasn't violent, it was controlled, but it sent a clear message. Marcus knew exactly what he was doing. Derek yanked his arm free, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. He started, but Marcus cut him off with a sharp glance. For the first time since they'd met, Derek hesitated. Something about Marcus's demeanor had shifted. He wasn't just standing there anymore. He was ready. Tyler and Jake exchanged nervous glances, but charged forward anyway, unwilling to back down now. Tyler swung wildly, aiming for Marcus's side, while Jake tried to tackle him from behind. But instead of panicking, Marcus moved with precision. He ducked under Tyler's punch, using the boy's momentum against him to send him sprawling onto the pavement. In the same fluid motion, Marcus spun around, catching Jake mid-lunge and guiding him to the ground with a firm but non-lethal hold. Within seconds, all three bullies were on the ground, stunned and winded. Derek stared up at Marcus, his chest heaving as he struggled to process what had just happened. This wasn't supposed to happen, not to him. He was the toughest guy in school, the one everyone feared. And yet, here he was, flat on his back, looking up at someone who hadn't even broken a sweat. For a long moment, silence hung heavy between them. Then Marcus spoke, his voice low and steady. "I didn't want this," he said, meeting each of their gazes in turn. "But you left me no choice. Next time, think twice before picking a fight." With that, Marcus turned and walked away, leaving Derek, Tyler, and Jake lying there in disbelief. None of them dared to follow him. They just sat there, nursing their bruised egos, and wondering how they'd so badly misjudged the quiet new kid. By the time Marcus walked back into the cafeteria, whispers were already spreading like wildfire. A freshman girl who'd been lingering near the dumpsters had witnessed the entire scene and wasted no time sharing the story with her friends. Within minutes, it felt like the whole school knew. Marcus Williams, the quiet, unassuming new kid, had taken down Derek, Tyler, and Jake in less than 10 seconds. At first, people didn't believe it. Derek was known as one of the toughest guys in school, someone who thrived on intimidation and brute force. How could a scrawny transfer student possibly stand up to him? But as more details emerged, how Marcus had dodged punches, flipped Tyler onto the ground, and left all three bullies sprawled out like ragdolls, the skepticism turned into awe. Students began watching Marcus differently. Some looked at him with wide-eyed admiration, whispering about how cool or badass he was. Others kept their distance, unsure whether to be impressed or intimidated. Even teachers seemed uneasy, glancing at him during class with a mix of curiosity and caution. One of them, Mr. Peterson, pulled Marcus aside after history class to ask if everything was okay. "I'm fine," Marcus assured him, his tone calm but firm. "They started it, but I ended it. That's all." Mr. Peterson nodded slowly, though he still looked skeptical. "Just try to stay out of trouble, all right? This kind of thing can escalate quickly." Marcus appreciated the concern, but he couldn't help feeling frustrated. He hadn't asked for any of this attention. All he'd wanted was to survive high school without drama. But now everyone seemed determined to make him into some kind of legend or villain. Derek, Tyler, and Jake avoided Marcus completely after that day. They slunk through the hallways like wounded animals, refusing to meet his gaze whenever they passed in the halls. Their usual swagger was gone, replaced by an almost palpable sense of shame. Derek especially seemed rattled, skipping gym class for the rest of the week and barely speaking to anyone outside his inner circle. But not everyone reacted with fear or awe. Sarah Chen, a junior who ran the school newspaper, approached Marcus a few days later during lunch. She introduced herself politely, explaining that she wanted to write a short article about what had happened, not to glorify violence or anything. She clarified quickly, I just think it's important for people to know there are other ways to handle conflict. Marcus hesitated. The last thing he needed was more attention, but something about Sarah's sincerity made him reconsider. Fine, he said finally, but don't make me sound like some kind of hero. I didn't do anything special. I just defended myself. Sarah smiled gratefully and promised to keep it respectful. True to her word, the article she wrote focused less on the fight itself and more on the idea of standing up for oneself without resorting to unnecessary aggression. To Marcus's surprise, the piece resonated with a lot of students. Several kids approached him afterward, thanking him for setting an example and admitting they wished they'd had the courage to stand up to bullies themselves. Despite the positive reactions, Marcus couldn't shake the weight of everyone's expectations. He wasn't sure how long this newfound respect would last, or if it was even real. Still, he reminded himself why he'd acted the way he did, not to prove a point, but to protect himself. And maybe, just maybe, to show others that strength wasn't always about throwing punches. It was about knowing when not to throw them. A few weeks had passed since the incident near the dumpsters, and life at Lincoln High had settled into a strange new rhythm. Derek, Tyler, and Jake were keeping their distance, avoiding Marcus like he carried some invisible force field. The hallways felt quieter when Marcus walked through them now. No snickers, no mocking glances, just a mix of curiosity and cautious respect. But one afternoon, as Marcus was leaving practice for the debate team, a club he'd reluctantly joined after some encouragement from Sarah, he heard footsteps behind him. Came a voice. Not loud or aggressive, but hesitant. Marcus turned to see Derek standing there, shifting awkwardly from one foot to the other. His hands were stuffed deep into his hoodie pockets, and his usual cocky demeanor was nowhere to be found. Marcus raised an eyebrow, waiting silently for Derek to continue. He didn't feel angry anymore, just wary. What did Derek want now? Derek started, then stopped, scratching the back of his neck. Look, I wanted to say, sorry. For messing with you. We shouldn't have done that stuff by the dumpsters, or any of the other crap before that. The apology caught Marcus off guard. He studied Derek's face closely, searching for signs of sarcasm or insincerity. But all he saw was genuine discomfort, the kind that comes from swallowing your pride. You mean it? Marcus asked finally, his tone neutral. Derek nodded quickly. Yeah, man. I messed up. Thought I could push you around because you didn't talk much or fight back. Guess I was wrong. He paused, looking down at his shoes. You're not what I expected. Marcus let out a slow breath, considering the words. Part of him wanted to brush Derek off, to tell him he didn't deserve forgiveness after everything he'd done. But another part of him, the part shaped by years of training under his uncle, knew that holding on to anger wouldn't change anything. Sometimes, moving forward meant letting go. Apology accepted, Marcus said simply. It wasn't warm or overly friendly, but it was enough. Derek looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Really? Just like that? Marcus shrugged. I'm not here to hold grudges. Just don't make me regret accepting it. Derek managed a small smile, though it faltered slightly. Fair enough. And hey, if you ever need anything, let me know. Seriously. It was a clumsy attempt at friendship, but Marcus appreciated the effort. Over the next few days, Derek surprised him even more by sticking to his word. During lunch, he introduced Marcus to some of his friends, explaining how Marcus had handled himself like a pro during the confrontation. While Marcus still preferred quiet conversations with Sarah or solo study sessions in the library, he found himself nodding politely whenever Derek waved hello in the halls. What truly amazed Marcus, though, was how Derek began changing, not overnight, but gradually. One day, Marcus overheard Derek stepping in when two freshmen got into a heated argument near the lockers. Instead of escalating things, Derek calmly told them to cool off and walk away. Another time, Marcus saw Derek sitting with Jake and Tyler, talking quietly about something serious. Whatever they discussed seemed to stick, Both boys toned down their behavior noticeably after that. Eventually, Derek approached Marcus again, this time with a different request. "Hey, so I've been thinking, remember those self-defense classes you mentioned in that article? The ones you used to take?" Marcus nodded cautiously. "Yeah. Why?" "Well," Derek hesitated, rubbing the back of his neck again. "I was wondering if maybe you'd teach me some moves. You know, help me learn how to control myself better instead of always throwing punches." For a moment, Marcus didn't respond. Teaching someone like Derek, even a changed version of him, felt risky. But then he remembered his uncle's lessons, not just about fighting but about discipline, patience, and using strength responsibly. If Derek genuinely wanted to improve, who was Marcus to deny him the chance? "All right," Marcus said finally, offering a small smile. "But only if you're serious. This isn't about learning how to hurt people. It's about protecting yourself and others." Derek grinned, looking both nervous and excited. "Deal." From that point on, their unlikely bond grew stronger. Marcus taught Derek basic techniques during weekend sessions at the community center gym, emphasizing control and focus over brute force. In return, Derek continued working to repair the damage he'd caused, encouraging his old friends to treat others with kindness instead of cruelty. Though Marcus never imagined becoming close with someone like Derek, he realized that real strength wasn't just about winning fights. It was about giving people a chance to change, even when they least deserved it. As the weeks turned into months, Marcus began to feel like he was finally finding his place at Lincoln High. With Derek's bullying behind him and their unexpected friendship growing stronger, Marcus started stepping out of his comfort zone in ways he hadn't imagined when he first arrived. He joined the debate team more actively, contributing thoughtful arguments that earned nods of approval from his teammates and even a few compliments from Mr. Harris, the faculty advisor. For someone who had spent most of his life avoiding attention, Marcus found himself enjoying the spotlight, at least when it came for the right reasons. But what truly surprised everyone, including himself, was his decision to start teaching self-defense classes at the local community center. It began almost by accident. After one of his weekend sessions with Derek, a group of kids hanging out nearby asked if they could watch. Marcus agreed, demonstrating some basic moves while explaining the importance of discipline and control. By the end of the session, several parents approached him, asking if he'd consider holding regular classes for their children. At first, Marcus hesitated. Teaching self-defense wasn't just about showing people how to throw punches. It required patience, responsibility, and a commitment to helping others grow. But then he thought about his uncle, who had always emphasized that true strength came from using your skills to protect, not harm. Inspired by those memories, Marcus decided to give it a try. The classes quickly became popular. Kids of all ages showed up, eager to learn. Some came because they wanted to feel tougher, others because they were tired of being picked on. Marcus made sure to focus not only on physical techniques, but also on mental resilience. Fighting isn't about proving you're better than someone else, he often reminded them. It's about knowing when to walk away and when to stand your ground. Derek attended every session faithfully, working hard to improve despite his initial clumsiness. At first, the other kids teased him lightly, calling him the former bully, or joking about how he used to throw punches without thinking. But Derek took it in stride, laughing along and admitting he deserved the ribbing. Over time, his dedication earned their respect, and soon he was helping Marcus demonstrate drills during class. Even Tyler and Jake showed up occasionally, though they kept a low profile. They weren't as committed as Derek, but Marcus noticed small changes in their behavior. They no longer joined in cruel jokes or pushed younger students around. Instead, they stuck close to Derek, clearly trying to follow his lead in becoming better versions of themselves. Back at school, the impact of Marcus's efforts rippled outward. The cafeteria felt less tense, the hallways quieter but friendlier. Students who once cowered under Derek's taunts now walked with confidence, knowing there was someone willing to stand up for them if needed. Even the teachers seemed to notice the shift, praising Marcus quietly for his role in fostering a safer environment. One Friday afternoon, after a particularly lively debate practice, Sarah pulled Marcus aside. "You've really changed things around here, you know that," she said, her tone warm but serious. "People look up to you, not because you beat up Derek, but because you showed us what real strength looks like." Marcus shook his head modestly. "I didn't do anything special, just tried to stay true to myself. And that's exactly why people admire you," Sarah replied with a smile. "Sometimes being brave means standing still when everyone expects you to lash out. You taught us that." As Marcus headed home that evening, he reflected on how far he'd come since stepping off the bus on his first day. What started as a struggle to fit in had turned into something much bigger, an opportunity to inspire change, not just in himself, but in others too. For the first time in a long while, Marcus felt like he belonged, not because he'd proven himself, but because he'd chosen to rise above adversity with grace and courage. The final weeks of the school year passed in a blur of exams, projects, and end-of-term celebrations. For Marcus, it was a time of reflection, a chance to look back on everything he'd experienced since moving to Lincoln High. He remembered the nervousness of his first day, the sting of Derek's taunts, and the quiet determination that had carried him through each challenge. Now, standing at the edge of graduation, Marcus realized how much he, and those around him, had grown. On the morning of the ceremony, Marcus sat quietly in his chair, dressed in the standard black gown and cap. The sun shone brightly overhead, casting golden light across the football field where rows of students waited patiently for their names to be called. As Principal Thompson delivered her opening remarks about resilience and growth, Marcus glanced around at the faces of his classmates. Some were smiling nervously, others laughing with friends, but all shared a sense of accomplishment. Even Derek, sitting a few rows ahead, looked different somehow, less brash, more grounded. When Marcus's name was announced, he walked confidently to the stage, accepting his diploma with a small smile. The applause from the crowd felt warm and genuine, and for once, he didn't mind being noticed. As he returned to his seat, he caught sight of his mom in the stands, clapping enthusiastically with tears glistening in her eyes. Her belief in him had never wavered, even when his own confidence faltered. Seeing her pride made every struggle worth it. After the ceremony ended, students spilled onto the field, hugging family members and taking endless photos. Marcus found himself surrounded by familiar faces, Sarah congratulating him on surviving senior year, Tyler and Jake awkwardly shaking his hand and thanking him for everything, and Derek pulling him into a brief but heartfelt one-armed hug. "You've been good for this place, man," Derek said earnestly. "I mean it. You changed things. For me, for everyone." Marcus nodded, appreciating the sentiment without needing to say much. Words weren't always necessary. Sometimes actions spoke louder. And over the past year, Marcus had shown everyone what it meant to lead not with anger or fear, but with patience and integrity. That evening, as Marcus packed up his room for the last time before heading off to college, he paused to look at the framed photo on his desk. It was a picture of him and his uncle taken years ago, both of them sweaty and grinning after a long training session. His uncle's lessons echoed in his mind. Strength isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about lifting others up too. Marcus smiled softly, realizing how closely he'd followed that advice without even noticing. As he closed the box and zipped it shut, Marcus thought about the future. College would bring new challenges, new people, and new opportunities to prove himself again. But he wasn't afraid. He'd learned that life wasn't about avoiding conflict. It was about facing it head-on, staying true to who you are, and finding ways to make a difference, no matter how small. Stepping outside, Marcus took a deep breath of the cool night air. The stars above twinkled faintly, reminding him of the countless possibilities ahead. He didn't know exactly what lay beyond this moment, but one thing was certain. Wherever he went, whatever he did, he'd carry the lessons of Lincoln High with him. Because in the end, the hardest battles weren't fought with fists. They were won through courage, empathy, and the unwavering belief that change was possible, even in the unlikeliest places.